Now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action, but only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And welcome to the hallowed halls of the University of Logic, better known as Cristiano's Conservatory, correcting convoluted conversations. This is Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, here on 1170 KFAQ. This is your antidote to popular talk radio. Well, it's great to be back.
It's good to have you back, Joe.
Well, I tell you, I'm on a real thin string tonight because I think if my surgeon knew I was here,
he would not like that. Huh?
No, he would probably operate all over again just for spite.
Yeah, and maybe about 12 inches higher, though.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, there you go.
Actually, I think I was under anesthetics for almost 5 hours.
Wow.
I had
you had it all, man. You got this soup to nuts.
Yeah, I had a congenital heart defect that's I've had forever.
Yeah.
And it finally gave loose and required massive open heart surgery. And I had that in the beginning of July. But here I am, and I really missed the broadcast. I know everyone's been pitching in, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate my listeners for hanging in there for me and with me. I certainly appreciate that. This was not easy. I'm a veteran of 9 triathlons, and in fact, a good friend of mine who's an anesthesiologist said that if I was not in the shape I am, and I'm 71 years old too.
Right.
If I was not the shape I'm in, he says there's a good chance I would not have pulled out of this thing.
Wow.
He says there were 4 different heart procedures done all at the same time.
Wow.
Wow, I thought it was only 3.
What's interesting,
Yeah, 4. Wow.
Yeah, the most dangerous part of it, I shouldn't say most dangerous, but a very dangerous part of it is actually the anesthesia. You know?
Oh yeah, they get something unbalanced there, and
right, and there's often for the time that I've been under, you get loss of memory, you know, and it didn't happen to me too badly because although I was calling my wife Lolita for the longest time,
I didn't mind that.
Oh, there you go.
but you know, things like I finally got on my computer and I had no idea what my password was, and it took me about 4 days for it to come back. I didn't look it up.
The light bulb
I did
went
not
off.
want to look it up, but I had to do that. But you know, being in the hospital, I looked like one of these science movies where you have you see these guys bodies floating in water with tubes in them, and then these big gigantic. Look like test tubes,
like
you know?
Resident Evil or something like that.
Yeah, right, like that. Well, that's what I was like. I had tubes up my nostrils. I had tubes on my throat. I had tubes in my my stomach, and tubes in my chest. And I literally couldn't move because I was basically on life support for some time. And but they wanted me to walk.
With
they
all
said,
the tubes.
You gotta keep, or else the blood doesn't flow or whatever, you know.
Well, it just doesn't move around.
And boy, you had to see me with all these tubes.
Did you take any pictures, Aaron?
Quite a few.
Oh boy.
Yes, his first steps.
Yeah, my first step, like a little
Baby
baby.
steps.
You know, and you're walking around. In fact, I was got to be pretty well known on my floor because they said that they have to beg people to walk 10 feet after this operation. I mean, people don't, and I would walk, I got to a quarter mile or more, and I would go walk around the whole floor, you know. Now, I'm a veteran of 9 triathlons.
Right, yeah.
And I recall, believe me, you recall every single one because they were all in the Oklahoma heat. And we're talking about you are running a race and biking on hills and swimming across the lake and whatever. You know, and it's in the high 90s to triple digits.
Wow.
And I have to say this honestly, that getting out of bed for the first time and walking, in fact, the nurse told me I walked 46 feet, was infinitely more difficult than finishing that triathlon in the near 100-degree heat.
Wow.
I'm not saying that.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, I know. And I can't imagine. Don't do this for fun, folks. This is something you don't want to do.
Oh, mercy.
But what was interesting is that you're sitting there and you can't. There's not much you can do. They got all these tubes and stuff into you. You're in ICU for a few days, but they have a TV up there and they give you a little remote. You know, my thumb can work at least a little bit. Yeah. And you realize, I turned on the a weather channel.
Oh yeah.
But the weather channel was in Spanish.
Oh no.
Yeah, but you had to see the weather girl. You know, now this is the truth. My wife comes in the room and she says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm watching the weather." I'm watching the weather. You know? I mean, I don't know where they got her from, but she had like a dress that she would wear, you know, at night on a date. You know. Low cut and high cut, but in the right directions, you know. She was incredible. So 20 minutes later, you know, my wife is walking in and out. She's pandering to me and the whole bit. God bless her. She's the most wonderful person in the world. And she comes in. So she comes in again about 20 minutes later. She says, "What are you watching?" I said, "The weather."
In Spanish?
She's so sweet. Instead of getting angry, she leans over and whispers in my ear and she says, "But honey, you don't speak Spanish." You know, but I want to tell you about an article. Oh, we only have 1 minute. Oh my God, times are flying by. All right, then I'll just finish up with this, folks. I'm sorry for the long diatribe on my operation and stuff like that, but it's just great to be back. You know, I really tried to come back last week. I couldn't move. I mean, I just got up. I know we had a rebroadcast. Gary, thank you so much for filling in for 2 weeks and stuff like that. Everyone just pitched in great. I hope that after today I'm existing. Tonight I'm still existing, and I'll be back forever. You know. But let's take our break now, and I'll be right back.
Then we'll get started. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. One thing I failed to mention in my opening introductory diatribe is I'm going back to school. I'm going to take I'm going to take a language, Spanish.
Yeah, I bet you are.
You know, when you're sitting there and you're staring up at the near ceiling, you know, where the TV set is. I don't watch television as a habit. You know, I watch programs that I want to watch, but I try not to watch them. Anyway, you realize where our society is really going, because TV is a reflection of our society, and it's pretty sad. It just is pretty sad. There are basically no programs on there that I would really worth watching, for me at least, you know, and you know, maybe a comedy here and there or something like that, but nothing that I would waste my time on. And it's sort of an indication of where we are going as a society. And that's very, very sad. You know, there were two programs. One is, I think, Naked and Survival or something like that.
Yeah.
Where you find a guy and a gal who've never met before. They get undressed and then they go across an island or something like that. But they do this naked. Now, why is beyond me. I mean,
it's crazy.
Why? You know. And then what surprised me is there's a newer program out, because I guess that was a blockbuster. Now, I have to admit, I watched it for about 2 minutes. It's the dumbest damn thing. The guy's got thorns in his feet, and he's got ticks all over his body, and, you know. Now, what's interesting is they block out all the private parts, you know, so it's all shaded out. Not shaded, but fuzzed out. But then there's a new program out, and this new program is dating naked. Now, I think to myself, you know, when I date a girl, when I ask the gal out, you know, I'm not a good-looking guy. I mean, I didn't have older girls at my feet or anything like that. But you know, you'd want to pick out a girl that's certain morals and whatever, and yet they meet on the beach totally naked. Now, what was really interesting about this one is that they also blocked out the private parts except for the rear. See? And no, my point is, you're laughing, but this is a real sad commentary. No, it's a sad commentary on our society.
It sounds like you had a real good time in the hospital to me.
Now, the next program, they're just going to block out the bottom part, but not the top part. You know what I mean? You see, my point is, where are they going with this?
Yeah, where are you going with it?
And then they interview the girl. Of course, she's there all naked. And
sounds like a perverted producer and director to me.
Yeah, I mean,
I want to produce films in Mexico.
Well, they have my application as we speak, by the way.
You don't think all the parents in America are going to want their daughters to go dating naked?
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's the new fad.
But you're right.
The new fad.
That was my wife, by the way. Yeah. But you're right. And then they asked the gal, you know, what are you looking for in a guy? I go, what a dumb question to ask.
Exactly.
What the hell are you doing here?
She quit looking. She's seen it already.
I'm looking for somebody who's a good accountant. Yeah. You know, it's so
has
dumb.
a sense of humor.
Yeah, that's right. And they all say the same thing. And it's I like someone who's loving and caring,
sense of humor
and fun to be with. And has, like my wife said, they all end up by and has a good sense of humor. I tell you, meeting a girl on the beach naked is a sense of humor, all right. But my point being is that, television, like so many other mediums, are roadmaps. They're roadmaps. And if you look at television, our television today in America is a roadmap. There is not a damn intelligent thing on television at all. Not a damn thing, Now, you find the History Channel and the archaeology, which I think is very fascinating, which I like to watch. I like to watch Ancient Aliens. I think that's fascinating. Right.
Nature shows, things like that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But it's a roadmap, and
Disney.
It tells us where we are going. And yet we will not recognize that. We are a country in decline. I think the name of the book is called The Four Horsemen, and it talks about the degradation of all empires or large significant countries. That has world influence countries, and they mention all of the steps of decline. Now I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's only a few of them. But the last three go something like this, in a expansion of the military, right? Guess what? Another one was a debasement of the currency, and this is the one that really surprised me, and I'm not making this up. It says an obsession with sex. That's the last one, and they said once you reach that point, your society has degraded to a point.
Sounds like Rome.
It cannot stay together.
As Nero fiddle, Rome burns.
Yeah. So there I am with tubes up my nose and my ear, everything like that. Watching this girl says, I like a guy with a nice sense of humor. I'm saying, this is it. This is it. And
we're here, folks. It's not coming. It's here.
Yeah, I want to talk about an article, though, because we're running out of time. By the way, we're going to have, don't go away, folks, because we're going to have J. Michael Oliver. He's the author of the book, The New Libertarianism, Anarcho-Capitalism, which I am, by the way. That's where I'm coming from. He's a free market anarchist in a political philosophy which advocates the elimination of the state in favor of individual sovereignty, private property, and open markets, which I'm 100% for. All right, but before we get to him, he will be on about 7:35. Let me just diatribe on something. I read an article that was fascinating, and it talked about, and of course my memory is not that good because I forgot half the stuff that I did. It's about a library, and I want to say it was in Michigan. And I don't know if anyone here has read this thing, but in Michigan, and the reason why it got received press is because they wanted to close it down. It was not being used, and it was costing a fortune to keep open. So they just put out an announcement that the library will close on, whatever, July 10th or whatever the case may be. I think it was this month. It's in July. And, but there was a fraction that wanted to keep the library open. And the reason for that is that they had a vested interest. They had a job there, and they get funding, etc. In order to keep this library open, it would cost the taxpayers 0.7 of 1 cent, right, in taxes. 0.7 for one library. I mean, here we are in most northern states, and I forgot which one it was. I want to say Michigan.
I think it was.
And here they are. People don't have enough money to put food on the table, and they're charging 0.7%. Doesn't sound like much, but that's just one item. To keep a library open that no one uses. So here's my talking point. Instead of having it go to a vote, which, by the way, the townspeople were for. I mean, there was no way this thing was not going to pass. So what did they do? The proponents of the library, those that had a selfish interest, changed the dialogue. They changed the problem from closing the library to burning the books.
Yeah, and it's a complete lie. Nobody's going to burn
No,
them.
no. So what they did is they said, the day after the election, come to a book burning ceremony. They're going to put all the books on the front lawn, throw kerosene on it, and then burn them all up. Well, now that was an outright lie. No one was going to put books on the front lawn. They were going to transfer them to other libraries and sell them and stuff like that.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that caused such an outrage that the library was voted to stay open by the largest margin of any vote in this town.
Wow.
Now, my point being is that the problem didn't change. The people have been made poorer for this, for having unfortunately, because the internet now takes a substitute for that. All right? The people are poor in that town for that, but they saved the books. It was all based on a false premise. They changed the dialogue. And I want to say this because we had the same situation in the Middle East. Now, I'm not going to get into the Hamas and the bombing and who bombed who. Forget about that. Now, no one wants to talk about the Middle East because no one wants to be called an anti-Semite. Anytime you say anything against Israel, you're an anti-Semite. Well, let me give you a little history, a little Joe Cristiano history. Listen up carefully, all right? I went to Pace College. Now, Pace College is now a university, and it's a very well-known, in New York, very well-known for its accounting program. It has accountants and marketing, advertising, all that, business-related stuff.
All business,
right?
yeah.
And it really was a very, very good school. Now, I tell you, I didn't qualify to go to Pace College. I wish I was smart enough. I'm dumb, But I was in that school for 2 years on probation, 2 full years. And I didn't get out of probation until I think the 5th or 6th semester. And they allowed me to graduate because I had to get basically A's and like B+, or else I was out on the street. Now, I didn't care about that because I was a street kid anyway. My father was going to kill me. I might be honest. Let's be honest with you, okay? All right. Here's my point. I belonged to a fraternity that was a regular fraternity. I didn't know what nationality anybody was. In fact, I think it was primarily Christian because I don't remember in my original fraternity any Jewish guys. But my best friend was Harvey Markfield. Now, Harvey Markfield was the craziest Jewish guy you have ever met in your life. He and I were terrors. I'm surprised. We almost got thrown out together. And he belonged to another fraternity, and I actually left now there was no Christian fraternity or Jewish fraternity or anything like that, but there was primarily, a predominantly, yeah. Now, I left a predominantly Christian fraternity, and again, I wasn't even conscious of it at the time, and I went to another one that was primarily Jewish. In fact, I remember there was just 5 or 6 guys that were Paul Winters was Irish, Eddie Hayes, there's Hector Hernandez, he was Puerto Rican, myself and another guy. I think 5 of us were just other than Jewish. Now, I also worked in the Jewish garment district. My father had a small contracting company, cut gloves. So it's not that I'm anti-Semite. I have nothing to do with these people. I was almost brought up Jewish. I mean, and I was colorblind to that stuff. And to this day, I love Harry Markfield, you know? So let me say that so you don't think I'm this isolated guy that says, you're a Jew, you're no good, you're this, you know, all that crap. I've been through that with my family. I can't stand it, you know? All right, now, here it is. There was a debate on television with all, you know, news head guys like Wolf Blitzer and those guys, you know? And they were talking about the Israeli-Hamas situation, whatever. And they made a comment. And their comment was this, that the Jews had a right to their own homeland. Now, although they debated all of these issues, which should have been debated, no one questioned that. In fact, after, and I think I want to say Wolf Blitzer said that, one of those guys said that, right? Everyone premised what they said by saying, well, we recognize that the Jews have the right to their own homeland. Wait a minute. No, they don't. They have no right to homeland. No one does. In fact, let me ask you a question. Jim, did you know that I am the grand, high, exaltic, mystic priest for the Waywards?
No.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'm honored to know you.
Yeah, and the Waywards is an abbreviation. It's my own church, you know. It's an abbreviation. It's actually the Church of the Wayward Supermodels, you know. Now, we have services every Tuesday night, but I tell my wife I'm going bowling, you know. She doesn't know, you know. Now, what I did...
She does now.
Oh, God.
What I did... No, really, what I did was this, is that I decided that since the Jews deserve their own homeland, so do I. Now, I don't know why the Jews picked Palestine, and I know something about that background. I've studied it and whatever. It's a fascinating story, you know, with the, you know, Balfour Declaration and all this other stuff, you know. Totally invalid. It's totally invalid because the British gave them land that wasn't even theirs. But so I decided I wasn't going to make the same mistake the Zionists at the time made. I mean, they got a desert, nothing. So I decided to claim for the Wayward Church, right, the French Riviera.
There you go.
You know, so I partitioned it off, you know, only supermodels allowed, and they threw me out. Now, but wait a minute. If the Jews have a right to their homeland just because they're Jewish, I have a right to the French Riviera. But my point is that we've changed the dialogue. The Jews have a right to live wherever they want. In my neighborhood...
They did for thousands of years.
Yeah. I mean, in my neighborhood, I live in a subdivision like most other people here in Tulsa. You know, I don't know how many people are Lutheran, how many people are atheist, how many people are Hindu, how many people are Muslim. I don't know, and I don't care. But they have a right. If they come in, they obey the rules and whatever, you know, they don't burn the place down. You know, they want to buy a house. No one says, by the way, are you Jewish? You know, they don't ask that. They have a right to exist. They have a right to exist amongst other people, but they don't have the right to take the land from someone else and forget about what Abraham said 4,000 years ago. Excuse me, but forget about that. But they don't have a right to take land from one people's or even take any land and say, now this is a Jewish community, everyone get the hell out.
Well, it's just like me. I'm Irish, Joe. If I went over to Ireland and I said, hey, me and the Murphy clan, we're back here. We're back.
That's right.
We want our piece of the property.
That's right.
You think they would give it to us?
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah, right away.
Yeah. But my point being is that what we've done with the Jewish question is we've changed the dialogue because we've changed the problem. There would have been no problem back in 1947 when many of the Jews in Palestine weren't done stupid. They said, although we have friction with the Palestinians, we would prefer to be Palestinian Jews because otherwise This ain't going to work. And, folks, it's not going to work. You're looking at World War III. Let's take a break, and we'll have our guest. Boy, you know, I'm back. I can't believe it. I'm still kicking. I think after this broadcast, I'll probably collapse or die or something like that. Yeah. I think on the phone right now we have J. Michael Oliver. He's the author of the new Libertarianism and Anarcho-Capitalism. He's... good evening, Mr. Oliver. Thank you so much for calling into Liberty Talk Radio here on 1170 KFAQ.
It's a pleasure. Anybody who says the University of Logic.
Well, you know, I have a preamble question, I guess, and that is, whenever people hear the word anarchy or any derivative thereof, it sort of turns everyone off. For example, there's that series on television, which I'm not sure if it's still playing, Sons of Anarchy. And so what do you see? Guys in motorcycles and, you know, drugs and all this other good stuff. Did you give any thought to saying, is this going to turn people off by virtue of the fact that I'm just using the word anarchy in the title and subtitle? Just out of curiosity.
It's one of those words. It really is. And, in fact, back when I wrote the book in 1972, which was actually a graduate work, and I recently published a year and a half ago, I thought hard. It was titled Anarcho-Capitalism. And at that time, libertarians, let's call them Wave 1 of what we now see as the libertarian movement. You know, how are you going to name this thing? Libertarianism was one of the words, but even the word libertarianism back in the 60s and 70s, if you said that in an academic environment, everybody would leap to the conclusion that what you're talking about are anarcho-socialists. You know, people like Bakunin, you know, and Kropotkin, and you know, European socialist types, who were also supposedly anarchists. So even the word libertarianism had a lot of confusion around it.
That's correct. And it still does.
It still does. I mean, you could say it now, and there's some libertarians out there that are, you know, every time there's a G7 meeting, they're rioting in the streets of Seattle, and that's fine. I don't like G7 any more than they do. But on the other hand, they're not pro-freedom, pro-free enterprise type society. They're implicitly for some kind of statist system, even though they act like they're not. So it's difficult to find a name that fits. You know, I mean, you use the word libertarianism, and fortunately, in this day and age, that word has now been co-opted totally by people that really are libertarians, free market type people.
Right.
And so that word fits now. It used to be, if you said libertarianism, it connoted different things. And now it's boiled down to essentially Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and so forth. And
well, are you
people endorse free market society, although they're not anarchists like I am.
Yeah. Well, excuse me, I'm confused. Are you referring to the Rand Pauls and the Ted Cruzes as libertarians?
I think they are essentially libertarians, and I think they are. Yeah, I would say that's a true statement. For instance, Ted Cruz is a kid. I've read, and I think it's true. Read Ludwig von Mises and Ayn Rand. He's a teenager. Okay, imagine this, a little Hispanic kid in Texas. Rand Paul, his father, of course, Ron Paul, who is a ardent libertarian with some variations. I have a few disputes with him, but not many. His son, when he was running for the Senate, when Rand Paul was running for Senate in Kentucky, whether it be 2009, something like that, there's a YouTube interview with Rand Paul. He's sitting in his doctor's smock, and he's just casually talking about the source of his name. And everybody thinks, well, it means Rand because he's named after Ayn Rand. It's not. It's named Rand. But he explains that, and then he makes the following statement. This hits at the core of what my book is about. He said, there's two people that greatly influenced my life, intellectual thinkers that influenced my life, other than my father. And it's Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard.
Okay.
He personally met Rothbard. Rothbard, of course, is the father of modern anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah.
He's an economist. And Ayn Rand, he puts the two together in one sentence without any sense of conflict between the two, even though personally there was a conflict between the two. A lot of people today who are objectivists or Ayn Rand students of objectivism, they don't like libertarians. Why? Because Rand didn't. And on the other hand, there are people who are objectivists don't like the libertarians, and the libertarians don't like the objectivists. And yet, in what I am arguing in the book primarily, is that these two idea systems, Ayn Rand's basic philosophy, which, as we know, has motivated hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people.
Yes.
Books sell like crazy. That is the underpinning of this wave two of the libertarian movement that's right in front of us. I mean, it's so big, it's a tidal wave. Even the New York Times and the Washington Post have had headlines such that said, this is the libertarian era, whether you like it or not, it's basically their view. And they're right. And the reason it's occurring is, aside from folks like you, obviously, who, were stirring the pot, but it's the ideas these people set in motion 40 and 50 years ago that haven't died. They're getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
The impact.
That's right.
So this movement is going to change things. And I think it's an idea-based movement. And I think Rand Paul is exemplary of it in many respects. And I think Ted Cruz is exemplary of it in many respects, although I doubt they're anarcho-capitalists. They're still limited government. But that's a debate you can have later, because you're not going to rip down government. That's not going to happen. It's going to devolve, because as people see it as a dysfunctional institution in this respect or that respect, pretty soon they're going to start thinking about, hey, they don't even run a good police force. They can't run a post office. What makes you think they run a good army or a good police force?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But what bothers me about me is the fact that I'm more a purist, I don't like when people take a basic libertarian principles, and again, you say anarchy, you think of, drugs, cars burning in the middle of the street, dead bodies in the street, But when you consider, just like in the write-up of your book, we're talking about the free market, people, the sovereignty of the individual, replacing, the role of the overreaching state, the law and order of the state. And I'm sort of a purist when it comes to that. And too often I hear people claiming to be libertarians, but yet violate that very principle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And, and I guess to some extent I'm not compromising. It's just that I see the wave, and I see people who embrace the core ideas, and yet maybe they don't apply them consistently.
Right.
Like, again, Rand Paul can't, even if Rand Paul admitted, over a beer in private, that he was so influenced by Rothbard. And remember, now, for a guy running for the Senate to say the two most influential people in his life are Ayn Rand and Murray Rothbard. Well, if anybody did their homework, nobody knows who Rothbard is back then. Very few people. If you went on Wikipedia and looked up Murray Rothbard, you see anarcho-capitalists. Here's a guy running for the Senate, admitting to the public, the possible opposition press types, that one of his heroes is an anarchist. Think about that. I mean, I don't know if he thought about it before he said that, but that YouTube video exists. It's still, you can go to YouTube and see it. It's fascinating. Yeah. Now these guys are in the Senate, so they can't they can't go but so far.
Right. No, I said, I never tell people I'm a libertarian because people have no idea what I'm talking. I make a joke on the station here. I always say, you say you're a libertarian. They go, oh, you're one of those lesbian guys that like to dance in the street in your dirty underwear. You're disgusting, But I mean, and that's not too far from the truth. I mean, that's the way people think, and so you have to sort of dance around those definitions.
Well, if you can come up with a new name, let me know. It's a tough one.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I'd give it to you free of charge. if I had
copyrighted, make a fortune.
Yeah. Now, tell me, what kind of impact has your book had, and what kind of feedback can you give us as to where we're going?
Well, as far as the best thing that happened to my little book is the von Mises Institute, the Ludwig von Mises Institute in Alabama. They reviewed the book, and they gave it, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but it was applauded highly.
Great.
And my book sales shot up big. Now, the von Mises Institute is the leading, they sort of compete with the Cato Institute.
Right.
And actually, both those institutes have roots in Rothbard. Rothbard was instrumental in starting both of those entities. And the one that's more pure to Rothbard's economics and politics which is true with the Austrian School of Economics, is the von Mises Institute. And they are known throughout the world among libertarians,
Right.
particularly of the Austrian school. For them to have endorsed the book like they did really set it in motion. And, it's not going to be selling, it's not the kind of book you'll buy at a bookstore simply because it deals with philosophy on basic levels to begin with, and only later it works up to issues like human rights, economic issues, political issues. Those are secondary to the basic principles of philosophical principles that Ayn Rand discovered and laid out in her novels and her writing. And these, in my opinion, despite her disagreement with me, were she alive today, and I did meet her once, by the way, in chance.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's absolutely.
In the very back of the book, I met her once.
Wow.
I lived about 2 blocks from her in Manhattan in the mid-1970s. Anyway, she would disagree. She thinks libertarian. She loved the Founding Fathers. Remember, she came over from Russia, and to her, the Founding Fathers and the American experiment was to her the best you could have. And she basically, I think, at that point, quit thinking about politics and just embraced it. And she didn't see the contradiction that you do of you can't fully have individual rights if there's some point in time and place and here and there and everywhere almost the state can supersede you.
Right.
Because it's always better for your own good, they supersede you. She never admitted that point. Whereas Rothbard developed that fully. So to some extent they were conflicting, but yet they were in agreement. And that's what the book tries to do. It takes Rand's objectivism and marries it to anarcho-capitalist politics, and I think it's a seamless whole. And that's why I'm so impressed by Rand Paul saying these two people in his mind are the most influential people in his life. He doesn't see a contradiction either. In effect, emotionally, he doesn't. He
Right.
puts the two together as great people, and he doesn't see the contradiction, and I don't think there is one. And therefore, if I had a goal, it would be to marry objectivist philosophy to libertarian politics,
Right.
the way it should be.
Right.
And
Well,
that's what the book is about.
now, although libertarianism has obtained a foothold, basically, in American politics, and
Yes.
there are more people who are getting to at least understand and appreciate the very principles,
Yes.
are we not getting to a point, as we did, for example, during the Civil War or any war in any country, where there's a bifurcation, Sunnis versus the Shiites, for example, whereby you have a large contingency dependent on the state, and then you have those people, the growing population, and those people with, they're not the top dogs, they're not the 1%ers, but sort of the working middle class is looking more towards libertarianism as a solution to what America really should be and what it was at one time. Do you not see a bifurcation there and maybe a class warfare there?
No, I don't think it'll happen. I think the intellectual trend is what's the important thing. And I think that what the libertarians have done is they've taken effectively the old GOP and they've taken the cadaver of that party. And I think they've finally, the LP tried to do this, Libertarian Party, for decades. It was moderately successful here and there. I think they've actually taken over the GOP. And I don't think the press realizes this. And I effectively taken it over. And put it this way, if they haven't, there's going to be a libertarian-type party that emerges, and the GOP will die as a third party. Either the GOP gets taken over by the libertarians, which looks like the trend to me, and becomes a new type of Republican Party. It's principled and anti-statist to the extent that it can be. Or the GOP is kicked out as a third party, and then there's a second viable party called the Libertarian or whatever you want to call it. But the old statists, the old trends have been broken. The old standards of left-right. The libertarians have shattered that, and I don't think you go back. I think there's too many intellectuals who realize this, and I don't mean intellectuals who sympathize, but even ones who don't, who realize, holy cow, things have really changed. You've got to remember the old Marx and Engels guys, a couple old academicians in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. They changed the world for a century.
Right.
And ultimately it was with guns, not their guns, but people who. That's not a viable way, but ideas lead actions. And I think the libertarians, through Rand, Rothbard, and folks like you, who take it from those levels to larger numbers of people, have changed reality. And I don't think you're not going back. The ideas they're in place. They're in motion. and they're not going to get lesser. They're going to get bigger. And as far as the conflict of the haves, the people who get the benefits of the status largesse, and those who, I don't know that that's going to be as big of a deal as the intellectual clash that's already underway. And once the intellectual clash occurs, things are going to change. And I also think real events in the world are also helping to facilitate this, because people are seeing, think about this, we're in a depression, okay, effectively. And the public in the U.S. is not like a Rooseveltian public. Give me more, give me more. There's plenty of people out there saying, give me less, get out of my way. And that in itself, think about it, the popularity of the Tea Party during a time of economic travail, where normally you'd think the public would be, you'd have a movement begging for more. Instead, you have a movement begging for less. That's interesting.
No, that is interesting, because that was going to be my next question, Mike. Is that we're moving? You know, we never really had a crash back in 2008. I mean, it was internal. They papered it over. We haven't created a situation. A friend of mine is moving to Iceland, and I have to give cooties to Iceland, because they told the bondholders, go shove it up your nose. You took the risk. We can't pay it. And they went from 10% unemployment to 4% unemployment, but not because of government interference, because they got rid of all of that. Now, I applaud them for that, you know. In fact, I want to go visit them in Iceland. Not when it's dark, though. But we see this here. Are we better off, in your opinion, taking there's the like the Blue Dog Democrats? They're quasi-libertarians, are they not?
Yeah, I mean, they don't know where they stand. I mean,
no, they don't know. Okay,
they're resisting a trend in their own party they don't like, and yet they don't realize why that trend exists there. They're in the wrong party. Okay, that's the problem.
Now we have the Republicans, a few Republicans who could be categorized as libertarians, you know, in the core, if you will. All right. Are we better off with a libertarian party or a libertarian fraction within the Republican Party, or the Democrat Party, for that matter?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's going to break loose anywhere. Anywhere it breaks loose is fine with me. I do suspect that the Republican Party is through as we knew it. And the only issue is whether the Libertarian and the Tea Party influence there is going to fully take it over, such that by 2016 there's no question in anybody's mind where that party stands. In other words, right now the ridicule, every time there's a Tea Party candidate runs in a primary and maybe loses, maybe wins, the press is all over it like, oh boy, see, he lost. They're nitpicking. They don't see the bigger picture. I mean, when you've got, it's not just Rand Paul and Cruz. There's 3 or 4 others I can name, senators, congressmen who are, you know, hardcore, not as hardcore as I am, but, you know, in a libertarian trend, and they use the word even. They don't use the word conservative so much as they often use the word libertarian. And that's a conscious decision on their part. You know, when they're going out to conservative voters and they use the word libertarian, in effect they're saying, you know, we think your conservatism shifted a bit. That's all I've done. I'm a libertarian. It's not less government. I want even less than what you want.
Right.
And it's a trend direction. Who knows? Maybe it'll even evolve further than that, which is what I'd like to see. But that's, you know, that'll happen in a generation or so. And I even think the trend is underway in China, you know, back in a backward sort of way. The Chinese have evolved out of their status system starting in '89 with Deng Xiaoping, when he said, hey, let's privatize agriculture so we can have some crops. Okay, he did. It worked. And he said, hey, how come this worked? They didn't figure that out, but they said it worked, so let's do it again. And they did it in another arena, and it worked. And all of a sudden, China, without thinking about it, just sort of backing their rear end in the trend in a different direction.
Right.
Less government in this area, less government. All of a sudden, they have an economy that's moved from, you know, medieval income levels to, you know, middle income levels. And it's, even though the quote Communist Party is still in charge, you know, half these guys in the Communist Party are also on boards of companies. So,
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. China fascinates me, and I'm not a historian by any stretch of the imagination, but China, it was so technologically advanced in 1100 A.D. Technologically advanced, more advanced than we were in the 18 and 1900s. Here in the West, and yet the Chinese, the dynasties, could look at their own history to see what was preventing them from moving forward and what was pushing them backwards. And they just stayed with ideology that didn't work, with all the evidence in the world that there were alternatives that did work, and made them the powerhouse of the world. They had a computer in 1100. A computer! And you got to see this. I saw this on the History Channel, and the way it worked, it was. And today's minds have a difficult time when they study it, figuring out how they would replicate it on their own, and they can't do that. But yet they lost that, and it's really troubling to me that all governments, we don't look at our own history. We just tend to take what we have now, change the dialogue, like I said earlier in my broadcast, concoct a new problem, and then make believe that we solved it and move on to another one. Now, do you know Wayne Allen Root?
I know the name, but I don't know. No.
Well, he was a libertarian vice president with Carr. What was his name? Barr is that Barr, right? Yeah, libertarian. He was he ran as vice president. Now, I happen to know Wayne Root. Love the guy, a phenomenal person. He's on CNBC and CNN all the time. They have the regular guests, and I think he is going to vie for the presidency through of the Libertarian Party. Now, in all fairness, and again, I say this with all due respect because I love the guy, he is not really a libertarian, and I of course, I don't call him up and holler at him, but too often he has so many of the neocon of ideology. For example, closing the borders and doing this and doing that. The typical neocon stuff.
Borders exist between states, not between people.
Right. My only point is that there seems to be a conflicting merger between the libertarians and the neocons. And by the way, we only have 2 minutes to go, because I want to give you at least 1 minute for you to tell our listeners about your book, etc. Okay, respond to that, please.
The title of the book is "The New Libertarianism: Anarcho-Capitalism."
Okay.
Go to Amazon.com, type it in. As far as the LP goes, when it originally was formed, I was writing this book. I published a newspaper in the early '70s called The New Banner, from Ayn Rand's The Banner and Fountainhead. The New Banner, and it was an anarcho-capitalist / objectivist publication. And at the time that LP was being formed, we denounced it. We thought it was silly to be a libertarian and want to run for office. Right. Over the years, the LP has actually done some good, I think. Not in terms of winning office and stuff like that, but at least they've generated a knowledge of the word and a connectivity where libertarianism is now said. People think, oh, free markets. Okay, a lot of people do. And so at least they've done that. But I agree with you. There's a lot of people that pop in and out of there as to run for president, and they really aren't libertarian. And it just sort of says that I think the LP is lost its purpose.
We seem to be afraid of our own principles. And you cannot compromise principles. If you have a principle, it's a principle. You can't, it's like saying, right, I'm very faithful to my wife no matter how many other women I go out with. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, Well, but this is what we do in politics, We say, well, I know the principle is correct, but we have to compromise. And then, of course, the principle goes straight out the window. Well, Mike, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I do hope you will accept our invitation to return to our program at a future date.
I would be happy to, and I'm glad you got through your operation fine.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for being our guest tonight.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
good night now. Okay, folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Also, remember, support those who support this program as they are helping preserve your freedom. With that, until next time, I'm Joe Cristiano. This is Liberty Talk Radio on 1170 KFAQ. Stay well, stay tuned.